My ex's new wife took my seat at my son's graduation, then my son said something that changed everything. The seats were gone. Not just taken, but ripped away, leaving only the bitter knowledge that some battles are fought not with words, but with a deliberate, cruel silence. Little did I know, this calculated insult would be the catalyst for a much grander, entirely unexpected victory. The usher, a nervous young man, barely out of his teens, averted his gaze. "Ma'am, I'm terribly sorry. Those seats up front are occupied. You'll have to stand here in the back." My hands gripped the program, trying to stop their trembling. From my spot, I could just glimpse the second row. Two chairs, distinct with their white cardstock name placards, stood empty earlier that morning. Julian had placed them there himself at 8:47 a.m., after pulling me into a hug in the parking lot and whispering, "Mom, you're in the second row. I saved you the best seat." Now, the placards were gone. Or, not entirely. One lay on the floor beneath the first row, torn cleanly in half. My name, Eleanor Vance, meticulously penned in Julian's careful blue marker, ripped apart like a discarded receipt. "Those were my seats," I murmured, the words barely a whisper. "My son reserved them." The usher, Alex, flinched visibly. "The lady up front, in the blue dress, she said there was a mix-up. Said her name was on the list." I followed his gaze. There she was, Serena, Robert, my ex-husband's latest wife. 28 years old, perched beside Robert in the exact center of the second row. She wore a cobalt blue Hervé Leger bandage dress, a brand I knew only because Julian had once, with the kind of bewildered expression only a teenage boy can muster, shown me her Instagram. The woman who replaced me was flaunting a dress that cost nearly $2,000. Serena turned her head slowly, as if she could feel my eyes on her. She spotted me standing against the back wall and smiled. It was a small, private smile, meant only for me, the kind that screams, "I know exactly what I did, and there's not a single thing you can do about it." Then, she raised her phone, tilted it just so, and pretended to snap a selfie. But I knew. She was filming me, framed perfectly beneath the red exit sign, exactly where she believed I belonged. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 44 years old. And for 18 years, I worked 2 jobs, chasing every shift, every opportunity, so that my son, Julian, could always have a front row seat to life, somewhere that truly mattered. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand those 18 years. Because without that understanding, you might think I was weak for not storming that auditorium then and there. I wasn't weak. I was strategic. And from the outside, strategy often looks a lot like weakness. That's precisely what they counted on. Robert and I married when I was 25. Julian arrived when I was 26. Back then, Robert was a junior loan officer at a regional bank, earning a modest $52,000 a year, constantly chasing the next big thing that promised more. When Julian was 6, Robert came home one Tuesday in March and declared he'd outgrown me. His exact word, outgrown, as if I were an old sweater. He'd found a paralegal at his firm, was filing for divorce, and needed the house. Could I, he asked, find somewhere else to live? He promised to be generous with child support. I'll never forget the look on Julian's face that night. He stood there, Spider-Man pajamas clutched in his hands, trying to make sense of why his mom was sitting on the kitchen floor, sobbing into a dish towel. I picked him up, told him we were embarking on an adventure. We spent 2 months on my sister Beatrice's couch before I found a 1-bedroom apartment on Lincoln Street, perched above a Vietnamese restaurant. The rent was $725 a month, the heat notoriously unreliable, and the bathroom door never quite latched. But Julian had his own bed in the bedroom, and I slept on the pullout, and we ate a lot of rice. Robert's child support was never quite what the court ordered. There was always an excuse, a bad quarter, a new car payment, a cash flow issue. When I tried to take him back to court, his second wife, Michelle, not Serena, this one lasted 3 years, flooded the family court clerk with so much paperwork that the judge, fed up with all of us, simply told us to figure it out. So, I figured it out. I worked the 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. shift, cleaning exam rooms at the Henderson Family Medicine Clinic 6 days a week. Then, I'd rush home, pick Julian up from after-school care, feed him, help with homework, and tuck him into bed. From 9 p.m. until 2 or 3 in the morning, I sewed. I took in alterations from Mr. Lee, who ran the dry cleaner 2 blocks down. He paid me cash, $4 for a hem, $7 for a zipper, $20 for a full suit alteration. On a good week, I'd make an extra $180. On a great week, $250. Wedding season, with its generous tips, was always the best. I didn't take a real vacation for 12 years. The only wedding I attended was Beatrice's, and I sewed all the bridesmaid dresses myself. Julian never lacked for anything that truly mattered. He simply went without things that didn't. He never owned a North Face jacket or Air Jordans. He had clean clothes I'd expertly altered, library books, and a mother who always showed up. He was reading at a 6th grade level in 2nd grade, tackling pre-algebra in 4th. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the pediatrician at Henderson Clinic, a woman with 22 years of practice, Johns Hopkins trained, the kind of person who notices details, told me when Julian was 9, "Eleanor, your son is gifted. Don't let the public school hold him back." I didn't. I drove him 40 minutes each way to a magnet middle school. I drove him to a STEM summer program at the community college. I drove him to robotics meets in church basements and to a state math competition in a borrowed Toyota that overheated twice on the highway. Robert, in 12 years, came to 2 of these events. He showed up for the awards ceremony in 6th grade, where Julian won the regional science fair. He snapped a picture with Julian, trophy in hand, posted it on social media with the caption, "So proud of my boy," and garnered 147 likes. He came to Julian's 8th grade graduation, bringing Michelle along, and they left immediately after the photos. Last month, he attended the senior awards banquet with Serena, wife number 3 by then. Serena then got into a hushed argument with Julian's calculus teacher about whether she was permitted to sit at the family table. She wasn't. It was a 5-person table, and we were 5. That's Robert, a father in photographs, a man who arrived for the applause. He missed the 103-degree fevers. He missed the 2 a.m. AP calculus tears. He missed the night Julian came home from middle school with a black eye because a kid named Ethan had called him "welfare boy" in the hall, and Julian, all 5 foot 4 inches of him at the time, had thrown the first punch. He missed all of it. I missed none of it. That's why I was standing under the exit sign. That's why I was not, despite Beatrice's hushed urgings, about to drag Serena out of that auditorium by her cobalt blue dress. Because if I lost my composure, if I gave them even 1 second of a scene to film, 18 years of being the steadfast one would be erased in 15 seconds of an online video. I had not survived 18 years to become the punchline of Serena's social media story. So, I stood under that red light, breathed deeply, and waited. Here's the thing about Serena. She didn't just show up at the graduation and steal a seat. The seat was the final move in a much longer game, one I had been watching her play for 2 years. Robert married her 18 months earlier in October, at a $90,000 wedding in Napa, to which Julian was not invited. Robert told Julian it was adults only. Yet, according to the photos, there were 3 other teenagers there. Their honeymoon was in Italy. Serena posted 72 photos, Beatrice counted. Serena was 26 at the wedding, 28 now. She was what magazines called a former model, which in her case meant 2 department store catalogs and a regional car dealership commercial. Julian called her a content creator, meaning she had 84,000 followers on Instagram and a TikTok where she posted about being a stepmom of a teen. Yes, she posted about Julian without his consent. The first time was about a year ago. Julian came home from a weekend at Robert's with a strange look on his face and showed me the post. It was a photo of Serena, perfectly lit, with Julian in soft focus in the background, doing homework at the kitchen island. The caption read, #BonusMomLife. He doesn't say much, but I see him. #StepmomLife. Julian had barely said 2 words to her all weekend, just, "Please pass the salt," and, "Thanks for dinner." I told him to politely ask her to take it down. She didn't. Instead, she posted a follow-up about the challenges of blending families when biological mothers have boundaries. She even landed a brand deal out of it, a tea company. I called Lena Rodriguez, the family law attorney who handled my divorce. Lena, 58, with 26 years on the family bar, is the kind of woman who wears her reading glasses on a chain and calls everyone honey. "Eleanor," she said, "honey, Julian's 17. In our state, a minor over 14 has standing to request a cease and desist for unauthorized commercial use of their image. Have him write Serena a letter. Have him CC me. We won't sue. We just need her to know." Julian wrote the letter. He CC'd Lena. Serena deleted the posts. She did not, however, forgive me. I want to be clear, I had never met Serena in person until that point. I had always been polite when discussing her with Julian, telling him she was probably trying her best to be respectful in his father's house. I'd also told him he didn't have to call her mom. Lena's letter was, I think, the first time Serena understood I was a problem. After that, the small things started. My texts to Julian mysteriously stopped delivering when he was at Robert's house. Serena had blocked my number from Robert's Wi-Fi. School events I was told had been rescheduled hadn't been. A Mother's Day card from Julian arrived 2 weeks late, postmarked from a town 300 miles away. Serena had accidentally taken it on a business trip. Then there was the lost tuition deposit for Julian's summer enrichment program, $400 that Robert had agreed to pay, which Serena had forgotten to mail until I drove to Robert's house at 9 p.m. and demanded the check in person, with Beatrice as my witness. Lena started a file. She called it the Serena folder. By the time of the graduation, that folder contained 81 pages. I need to tell you about the morning of graduation. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., unable to sleep. I'd ironed my dress the night before, a navy A-line I'd bought at a department store outlet for $89 and altered myself, and polished my single pair of black pumps. Julian was already up, in the kitchen, cap and gown on, eating cereal and engrossed in his laptop. Mom, he said without looking up, I need you at the school by 8:30. Don't be late. I'm never late, I replied. I know. But today, don't be late. He finally looked up at me. His eyes, Robert's eyes but kinder, always kinder, held something I couldn't quite decipher. I love you, he said. I love you too, baby. No, Mom. I mean, I love you for everything. I know what you did. I sat down at the kitchen table. I hadn't expected this. He wasn't usually one for such heart-to-hearts. Julian, I started. Don't cry, Mom. Not yet. Today's going to be a good day. I didn't cry. I drank my coffee. I drove him to school at 8:15. He hugged me in the parking lot and said, front row, second from the aisle. I saved it for you and Aunt Beatrice. He pointed at his cap. Something was written on top in white paint marker. I couldn't read it from below. What does it say? I asked. He grinned. You'll see. I drove home, picked up Beatrice, and we returned around 9:45. By the time we reached the auditorium doors, something felt wrong. I sensed it before I saw it. Beatrice felt it. Too. She'd been a kindergarten teacher for 15 years before becoming an assistant principal. She had radar for trouble. She gripped my arm. Eleanor, she whispered, why is Robert's car in the handicapped spot? It was a black Range Rover, no placard. And why, she added, is Serena filming us through the windshield? She was. Serena sat in the driver's seat, phone raised, lens pointed directly at us as we walked from the parking lot to the auditorium doors. I waved. I forced myself to wave. She did not wave back. We went inside. The auditorium seated about 600 people. The graduating class numbered 218. Seating was reserved for family, 2 seats per graduate in the first 4 rows, more in the back. Row B, seats 4 and 5, those were for me and Beatrice. We walked down the center aisle. I felt people's glances. I'm not naive about what people see when they look at me, a 44-year-old woman in an $89 navy dress, with hair I'd cut myself the night before. Beatrice beside me, in the only blazer she owned, carrying the camera I'd borrowed from Mr. Lee at the dry cleaner. We reached row B. The seats were taken. Robert was in seat 5. Serena was in seat 4. The name cards Julian had placed there at 8:47 a.m. were gone. The chairs now bore different cards, Robert Vance. Serena Vance. I stood there for a second. Robert, I said. He looked up. His face did that thing it does when he's caught, a micro-flinch, instantly suppressed. Eleanor. Hi. Yeah, there was a mix-up. Serena talked to the school. They moved us up here. Those were my seats, I stated. Serena didn't look up. She was scrolling her phone. Honey, she said, still not looking at me, his mother can watch from the back. She should be used to it by now. Then she laughed. It was a laugh I will hear in my head for the rest of my life, light, almost musical, the laugh of a woman who has never in her life been told no. Robert said nothing. He didn't even look at me, he looked at his program. Beatrice's hand clamped around my arm like a vice. I could feel her shaking with rage. Eleanor, she said quietly, just loud enough so the row behind us couldn't hear. Let me drag her out by her hair right now. I will do it. I will pay any consequence. Beatrice, no. Eleanor, she stole your seat at your son's graduation. Not today. Don't ruin this for Julian. I felt the usher, Alex, appear at my elbow. He'd been watching from the side aisle. Ma'am, I'm sorry. The seats up front are taken now. You'll have to stand back there. He pointed to the back wall, under the buzzing red exit sign. I looked at Serena. She looked up. She winked. That's the part one want you to remember. She winked. Then she raised her phone, tilted it 45 degrees, and pretended to take a selfie, filming me. I let Alex walk me back to the exit sign. I stood there. I did not cry. Beatrice did not stop shaking for 30 minutes. I didn't know Julian was the valedictorian until the principal announced his name. He hadn't told me because, I would later learn, he was meticulously planning a speech for 3 weeks and wanted it to land cleanly, with maximum impact. He didn't want me to be nervous, and he certainly didn't want anyone in our family circle to leak a single word of his intentions. So when Principal Arthur Hayes, 12 years in the district, the kind of administrator who truly knows his students, walked to the microphone and declared, "It is my honor to introduce the class of 2026 valedictorian, Julian Vance," my knees buckled. Beatrice caught me, and I had to grab the wall for support. The room erupted in applause. 600 people on their feet. Julian's classmates stomping. A teacher I didn't know, a woman in a yellow blouse, covered her mouth in joyful disbelief. Robert stood up first. He clapped loudly, his chest puffed out, his face beaming as if he himself were receiving a personal honor. Serena stood next to him, phone in hand, recording. Recording for her followers. Recording for the brand deal she'd no doubt secure from this, my stepson, the valedictorian. And I watched her angle the camera away from me, away from the back wall, away from the actual mother of the boy at the podium. Julian walked up the steps. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at Serena. He looked straight to the back, past 600 people, straight to me under the red exit sign, and his eyes, Julian's eyes, which I had known since they first opened in a hospital room in 2008, went cold. Not sad, not angry. Cold. He held his speech. He picked it up. He folded it in half. He folded it again. He slipped it into the inside pocket of his gown. 600 people went absolutely still. Principal Hayes, behind him on the stage, took a small step forward. The vice principal touched her hand to her chest. A teacher in the front row, Mr. Henderson, AP English, the one who'd written Julian's college recommendations, actually set down his program. Julian leaned into the microphone. His voice was low, quiet, steady. I had a speech prepared. It was about gratitude. About the future. He paused. I'm not giving that speech. The room, I want you to understand this, did not breathe. Serena slowly lowered her phone. Robert's shoulders went stiff. I was going to thank the people who got me here, the teachers, the coaches, my family. His eyes flicked just once to Serena. But this morning, somebody in this auditorium did something. Something I will not forgive. Serena's face changed. I want to describe this very carefully, because I want you to see it the way I saw it from the back wall. Her smile did not disappear. It cracked. It stayed on her face, frozen, but the muscles underneath stopped holding it up. It became a smile drawn on a corpse. Robert turned in his seat slowly, like a man whose seatbelt had just locked. Julian, he mouthed. Julian didn't see him, or pretended not to. He pointed, not at the back, not at me. He pointed straight at Serena. 1,000 heads, actually, I counted later, about 600 heads, plus the teachers, plus the school board, plus the parent who turned out to be on the school board's communications committee. Turned in one slow ripple. Phones lifted. I want to be very specific, phones lifted in unison, like a flock of starlings. You sit in that seat, Julian said, and you think nobody saw what you did. You think my dad's money makes you untouchable? Serena grabbed Robert's arm. I could see her knuckles go white from 20 rows back. Do something, she hissed. The mic on the podium picked it up faintly, but it picked it up. Robert did not move. Robert could not move. I have known Robert Vance for 20 years. I was married to him for 9. I have seen him in every kind of crisis a small-time man can have, and I have never, in 20 years, seen Robert Vance look the way he looked in that second. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. Julian's voice dropped lower. Before I accept this diploma, I'm going to tell every single person in this room exactly who you are, and exactly what you did to my mother this morning. He reached into the inside pocket of his gown. He did not pull out the speech. He pulled out a folded piece of white cardstock with my name on it, Eleanor Vance, in his careful blue marker, torn in half. He held it up to the microphone. The auditorium's overhead camera, they were live streaming the ceremony, because it's 2026 and every graduation is online, zoomed in on the torn card. I have the security footage, Julian said. I have the texts. I have the receipts. Serena's mouth fell open. Robert's face turned gray. Julian leaned closer to the mic, and in about 30 seconds, this entire auditorium is going to know exactly why my father's new wife is about to lose everything. Here's what Julian knew. He knew it because Julian, my brilliant, careful 18-year-old son, had spent 6 weeks quietly preparing for the possibility that something exactly like this might happen. He knew it because Lena Rodriguez, my attorney, the woman who had built the 81-page Serena folder, had 2 months earlier sat Julian down and said, "Honey, your stepmother is escalating. Be ready." He knew it because on the morning of the graduation, at 8:47 a.m., he had walked into the auditorium, set down 2 name cards on row B, seats 4 and 5, walked out, and then immediately doubled back and watched from the stage door what would happen next. What happened next, on the auditorium's interior security camera, which Julian, as the student body's outgoing tech committee chair, had access to via the school's media systems closet, was this: at 8:52 a.m., Serena Vance entered the auditorium alone. She walked, in her cobalt blue dress, directly to row B. She looked at the 2 name cards. She picked up the card that said Eleanor Vance. She tore it in half. She dropped both halves on the floor. She picked up the second card, Beatrice Cooper, and tore that one in half too. Then she pulled 2 new cards out of her purse, pre-printed, Robert Vance, Serena Vance. She set them on the chairs. She took a selfie with the chairs. Then she walked out. It was all on tape. Julian had a copy. But that wasn't the worst thing he had. The worst thing he had was the texts. The texts were between Serena and Alex. Yes, Alex, the 19-year-old usher in the clip-on bow tie. Alex, it turned out, worked at the country club where Robert and Serena were members. Alex, it turned out, had been promised $500 by Serena, Venmoed at 7:14 that morning, to handle the seating situation discreetly, especially regarding the ex-wife. Julian had screenshots. He had the Venmo receipt. He had, in fact, walked over to Alex during the processional and quietly informed him that Julian's attorney was about to call Alex's manager, and that if Alex wanted to keep his job, his college acceptance, and his clean record, he would tell the truth to anyone who asked. Alex, terrified, had handed over the rest of the text thread. The text thread contained, among other things, Serena writing, "Just make sure she stays in the back. I want her humiliated. He needs to see who actually belongs there." That was at 7:11 a.m., 3 minutes before she Venmoed him. Julian did not, in the end, read all of that out loud. He didn't have to. He held up the torn name card. He said into the microphone, "My mother worked 2 jobs for 18 years to send me to this school. She cleaned exam rooms at 5 a.m. and sewed wedding dresses until 3 a.m. She did not miss one parent-teacher conference, not one, in 12 years. His voice broke just once. Then he steadied. "I'm valedictorian because of her. Not because of my father. Not because of his wife. Her." He pointed to the back, to me. 600 people turned around. I felt every single pair of eyes. I felt the heat of phones rising. I did not move. I stood under the red light and I let them look. Julian's voice came back, harder now. 2 hours ago, my father's wife paid an usher $500 to humiliate my mother in front of this entire ceremony. She tore my mother's name off her seat. She has been recorded doing it. I have the security footage in my pocket. I have the texts. I have the Venmo. I have the receipts." He pulled a manila envelope from under the podium. He set it on the lectern. "This is going to my attorney in." He glanced at the clock at the back of the room. "In about an hour, along with everything else my mother's lawyer has been collecting on this woman for the last 2 years." Serena stood up. She stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. She grabbed her purse. She started moving for the aisle. That's when Principal Hayes, 12 years in the district, you may recall, the kind of administrator who actually knows his students, quietly nodded to a man at the side of the stage. The man was Officer Miller of the school resource officers. 14 years on the force, 6'2", built like a wall. Officer Miller had been at the side door for the entire ceremony. He stepped very smoothly into the center aisle. He didn't touch Serena. He just stood there. Serena stopped. Robert finally turned and looked at me for 1 second. 18 years distilled into 1 second. His face was the face of a man who had just realized that the long con he'd been running on himself, the story where he was a successful father, a good provider, a man surrounded by women who adored him, had collapsed in front of 600 witnesses. He looked. Sewing about a year ago. I sleep more now. Dr. Reed, 22 years in practice, you'll recall, actually noticed. She told me I looked younger. She told me my shoulders had come down. I didn't know my shoulders had been up. I think about Serena sometimes, less than I used to. I think about the moment she winked at me from row B. I think about how, for that 1 second, she truly believed she had won. I think about Robert, whom I will probably see twice a year for the rest of my life, at Julian's college graduation, at Julian's wedding, if there is one, and who will spend those occasions trying to pretend none of this ever happened. But mostly, I think about my son. I think about the moment he looked at me from the podium with cold eyes. And I realized with a jolt I will feel until the day I die, that the quiet, careful, kind little boy I had carried up the stairs of an apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant had grown into a young man who could level a room of 600 people with a folded piece of paper. I think about the cap he wore on stage, row 2 or row 22. You're always front row to me. I think about that, and I don't cry. I learned a long time ago not to cry over good things. I save the crying for the bad ones, and there haven't been any of those in a while. I think about a thing Julian said to me in the car on the drive to MIT. We were about 3 hours in. He'd been quiet for a long time. Then he said, without looking at me, "Mom, I want you to know something." Okay. I knew about Serena paying the usher before she did it. I turned my head slowly. What? Alex was in my AP Stats class. He texted me at 7:12 that morning. He thought it was funny. He thought I'd want to know what my dad's wife was offering him. I stared at him. Julian, I began. I told him to take the money. You told him to take the money? I told him to take the money. Do exactly what she asked, and then forward me the entire thread, including the Venmo. Julian, she was going to do it anyway, Mom. With or without him? I just made sure it was on tape. I had to pull over. I pulled into a rest stop and sat there for a full minute, staring at the steering wheel. And then I looked at my son, my 18-year-old son, on his way to MIT. And I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because I realized in that moment that the boy I had raised on rice and library books and 2 a.m. calculus had not, in the end, needed me to protect him. I had spent 18 years teaching him to be careful, to be quiet, to be strategic, to wait. He had been listening the whole time. And when the moment came, when his father's wife smiled at his mother from row B and tore her name in half, he had not panicked. He had set the trap. He had baited it himself, and he had waited for her to walk into it. I started the car back up. I pulled back onto the highway. I said, "Julian, I love you. I love you so much." He said, "I know, Mom." Then he said very quietly, looking out the window at the trees, row 22 was always good enough. They just didn't know.